This video is supported by Brilliant.org. Comets have always held a special place in our hearts. Wait, did I say hearts? I meant nightmares. Because back in the day, the night sky was a tapestry on which we sketched our mythologies, our creation myths, the gods that ran our lives. It was eternal, it was unchanging, it gave structure to our beliefs. So when something new happened, like say, a big bright swoosh appears across the sky, that meant something. Usually not something good. For the majority of human history, comets have been harbingers of doom, bad omens, bad signs of things to come. This is actually where the word disaster comes from. Dis-aster, meaning bad star. Many major historical events, defeats in battle, deaths of kings, natural disasters, plagues and pestilence, all have been associated with the appearance of a comet. But then we figured out that the sun is actually the center of the solar system, that we're just one of many planets orbiting around it, and that comets are just big icy rocks blowing snow around them as they go. And that these icy rocks have actually hit our planet and caused major mass extinctions in our past. So they kind of were harbingers of doom. But still, comets remained a mystery. Where do they come from? How many of them are out there? And this is something we didn't really fully understand until 1950. And the answer is pretty far out. The Oort Cloud is an incredibly distant sphere of trillions of icy artifacts from the very beginning of our solar system. It's an unthinkably vast field of potential comets radiating out in all directions from the sun, and it's an archaeological treasure trove. Because our solar system was born when a cloud of dust and gas coalesced into itself until it got hot enough to spark fusion, creating a star in an enormous nuclear blast. This blast blew ice and debris out beyond the gravity well of the star, leaving the heavier rocky dust and debris around the star, which eventually, because of physics weirdness, flattened into an accretion disk, later becoming the planets and moons and asteroid belts. And that's why comets are of particular interest to astronomers, because they're a picture of what the solar system was like when it was still fresh in the oven. That's why the Rosetta mission landed on Comet 67P to take measurements and learn what the composition of the comet is so we can see what elements were present at the very birth of our solar system. So you might be wondering, why don't we just fly out to the Oort Cloud and, take measurements there? New Horizons just flew past Ultima Thule. Could we just keep going out to the Oort Cloud too? And the answer is yes, we totally could. And New Horizons will definitely reach the Oort Cloud in about 300 years. That's how far away the Oort Cloud is. It's ridiculous. The idea that the solar system is bordered by an immense cloud of comets is something that's been thrown around since the early years of the 1900s. But it was Jan Hendrik Oort, a Dutch astronomer, who actually did the math behind it and put it on solid mathematical footing in 1950. Which ironically was 1 year before Kuiper published his paper in 1951, so we actually sort of discovered the Oort Cloud first. According to Oort's paper, which I'll link down below, the trajectories of the comets didn't indicate that they were coming from other stars. They weren't interstellar objects, meaning they had to have come from, fairly close by to where our star is. Their orbits indicated that they've always been a part of our solar system, orbiting just outside of it. The specific comets that Oort looked at are what are known as long-period comets. These are comets whose orbits take at least 200 years. Given the speed and angle of Oort's sample comets, he concluded that they came in from a distance of about 50,000 astronomical units from the sun. An astronomical unit, or AU, is the distance from the sun to the Earth, or 93 million miles, or 150 million kilometers. Just for comparison, Neptune's orbit actually takes it out to about 30.1 AU from the sun, and the Kuiper belt extends out to about 50 AU. Just to reiterate, the Kuiper belt is 50 AU away. The Oort Cloud is 50,000 AU away, and extends for another 100,000 AU after that. Also, just for comparison, 1 AU, the distance from the Earth to the Sun, takes about 8 minutes for the light to reach us. To reach Neptune, it takes 4 hours and 12 minutes. For light to span the Oort Cloud would take 1.5 years. With such a vast field to play in, the trillions of comets aren't exactly cramped. Even if the astronomers say that the mass of the Oort Cloud is probably 50 to 100 times that of Earth, they're so far apart they rarely come anywhere near each other. So rather than object-to-object collisions being what dislodges these things and causes them to fall down toward the sun, it's thought more likely that it's the whole solar system passing through some interstellar gas, or maybe even another star passing close by and its gravity messing things up. This also explains why a lot of comets tend to come from similar directions, disturbances that happened a long time ago. So whatever it is that does it, something dislodges one of these comets and it starts falling towards the sun. So what happens next? Well, when they reach a distance of about 121 AU from the sun, they kind of take a pause. A heliopause, that is. The heliopause is the boundary of the sun's stellar wind. You may remember hearing in 2012 that Voyager actually crossed into interstellar space. That means that it actually passed the heliopause. And this is actually a second line of evidence that Oort presented when making this argument. The idea that if there wasn't a big, huge cloud out there outside of the sun's influence, then these long period comets would have burned out years ago, either by crashing into a sun or a planet, or eventually their tails would just evaporate. Because it's the evaporation of ice from the comet's nucleus that creates that big, gorgeous tail that's freaked us out all these years. That tail, by the way, always flows away from the sun. So even after the comet has circled around the sun and is moving away from it, it's actually moving in the direction of its tail. Most people know that, but some don't. But the point is, if these comets lost tail material every single time they went down through the solar system, then they would have probably lost their tails in about 2 million years. So how could you have these comets flying through the solar system for 4.6 billion years and still have tails? Oort argued that it could only be because they spent the first 4.6 billion years beyond the heliosphere. Once they got knocked into where it was warm, they were on a ticking clock, but as long as they were beyond the heliopause, they were safe. So there had to be a reserve of new comets so far out that we can't see them, hence the Oort cloud. And astronomers speculate that some comets with short orbital periods came from the same place. They just kind of got caught up in the gravity well of the sun, probably being slowed down by passing by certain planets. And one of those captured comets is arguably the most famous comet of all time, Halley's Comet. By the way, Jan Oort was one of the few people in history that actually got to see Halley's Comet twice in his lifetime. As many of you know, Halley's Comet comes around once every 76 years. Well, Jan Oort was born in 1900, so he got to see it at 10 years old in 1910, and then he got to see it again in 1986. And in fact, when it came around in 1986, it wasn't at a very good angle for him to see it from the ground, so he actually got to go up in a plane and see it from the sky. They made sure that he got to see it, which is fitting because he's the guy who discovered where that comet came from. Now, fun Halley's Comet fact, the one that he saw in 1910 actually coincided with the death of Mark Twain, who actually predicted his death because he was born at the same time that it came the previous time, which was 1835. In fact, he said, quote, "It will be the greatest disappointment of my life if I don't go out with Halley's Comet. The Almighty has said, no doubt, now here are those two unaccountable freaks. They came in together, they must go out together." Now, I was actually 11 when Halley's Comet came in 1986, and I got to see it. I remember it was a big deal. It was all over the news and everything, and it actually happened on my birthday, ironically, and I got a little telescope that has Halley's Comet, a little commemorative telescope. It's at my dad's place, and I hope I'll still be around to see it when it comes around in 2061. That'd be cool. I mean, well, who knows? At this rate, I might actually get to see it from space. But the one in 1986 was also cool because ESA's Giotto spacecraft actually got up close and personal and got some really cool photos of it. Actually, one more cool thing about Halley's Comet is that you can actually see little parts of it twice a year. Because there are two meteor showers, the Eta Aquarids in May and the Orionids in September, that are caused by the Earth passing through the cloud of dust that Halley's Comet left behind. So, pretty cool. Now, this might be a good time to point out that technically, we've never actually seen the Oort cloud. But in the years since Oort made his calculations, more and more evidence has piled up to back up his theory, including the 2003 discovery of Sedna. Sedna is a dwarf planet that was first spotted by a team from Caltech led by Mike Brown. Mike Brown is one of the people who had a lot to do with the fact that Pluto got demoted to a dwarf planet, so Pluto lovers don't quite love him that much. But to be fair, he also discovered Eris, which is actually more massive than Pluto, and he calls that a dwarf planet too, so there's that. Sedna makes its closest approach to the Sun at 76 AU, but it has an elongated orbit stretching all the way out to 936 AU. They say this makes it eligible to be considered an inner Oort cloud object or an IOC object, although there's a lot of disagreement about this because a lot of people think that the Oort cloud doesn't really begin until about 2000 AU. But one argument that it should be considered an inner Oort cloud object is because it extends way beyond the Kuiper belt, which kind of fades away after about 48 AU. So it's definitely from whatever is outside of the Kuiper belt. As for whether or not that can be considered an Oort cloud, that's a discussion for another time. But is it possible that the Oort cloud starts in closer than we think it does? Is it possible that Sedna actually interacts with some objects in the Oort cloud? It's hard to say for sure. Guys like Mike Brown have been looking for more and more distant orbiting objects for a long time now, and there's a good reason for that. It's because they're looking for Planet 9. In fact, Brown heads up a team of researchers including Konstantin Batchkin, fellow astronomers Chad Trujillo, and Scott Shepard, currently working out of Hawaii. What they're looking for is a huge planet, about 6 times the size of Earth, that's orbiting way outside the Kuiper belt that could be stirring up these Oort Cloud objects. So I talked about this back in 2016, but these guys are studying a handful of comets that all seem to be coming from the same direction and probably got stirred up at the same time period, meaning it was all caused by one object that passed through at a particular time. And the math they have to work with is just as solid as anything that Oort had, or Kuiper had, or Clyde Tombaugh, who found Pluto. In fact, Tombaugh was looking for the exact same thing when he found Pluto, but Pluto's just way too small to be the culprit. The point is, according to some of the most reputable and accomplished astronomers out there, Planet 9 exists, and it's out there, and it's still waiting to be discovered. If they can prove this exists, it will completely revolutionize our understanding of how our solar system is constructed, and maybe even give us a better understanding of our entire stellar neighborhood. What might also help is being able to see the Oort Cloud itself. Fadgen and Brown are looking forward to 2022 when the Large Synoptic Survey telescope goes online in Chile. This one might actually be strong enough to actually spot Oort Cloud objects, but another option is to actually find Oort Clouds around other stars. Now this won't observe the Oort Cloud directly, it's just way too far away, but it would be able to infer that there is an Oort Cloud by the interference of Oort Cloud objects around stars. Even the James Webb Space Telescope is not going to be strong enough to see Oort Cloud objects, so that's kind of a bummer. So for now, we have to let those objects come to us if we want to get up close and personal with them, and one possible option could be Sedna itself. It's currently on an approach trajectory, and according to Ethan Siegel from the Starts With a Bang blog, he thinks that we could actually intercept this thing. He says there are two launch windows, May of 2023 and June of 2046, and in either case, we could actually launch a probe that would get there, a probe that would take 24 years to arrive. I'm gonna be an old man by then. Hell, by that time, we could just wait for Halley's Comet to come back. Halley, by the way, was not remotely the first person to spot Halley's Comet. He was just the first person to calculate its trajectory and make a prediction as to when it would come back. So when it did come back, everybody was like, oh, okay, we'll name the comet after you. And I think that's fair enough. But if you want to know how he figured it out, one place you might want to check is Brilliant.org. Because Brilliant walks you through the very problem solving that's required to make those kinds of calculations. They take you through one piece at a time so that you can learn as you go, figure it out on your own terms. You might want to get started with a more basic level astronomy course and then work your way into gravitational physics to understand how all the motions of the solar system work. Brilliant is a learning platform that teaches you how to think like a scientist, and you can sign up for free at brilliant.org/answerswithjoe and get access to all their free weekly brain teasers and puzzles, and the first 200 people that want to sign up for the premium subscription gives you access to all their courses. Get 20% off your subscription for life. It's called Brilliant for a reason. Go check it out for yourself. Brilliant.org/answerswithjoe. Links down in the description. Big thanks to Brilliant for supporting this video, and a huge shout out to my Answer Files on Patreon that are forming an awesome community and helping me out. I love what you guys are doing. There's some new people that have just joined. I got to murder their names real quick. We've got Wes Kobernick, Tom Farrow, John Ayler, Etienne Guerrero, Ryan G, Steve Bradshaw, Jared Lester. Dispossession is 9/10 of forfeiture law. That's a name. Wesley Magyar, James Utz, Joseph Simonstad, Colin Bean, Gordon Lecar, Stuart Christopher Brownlee, and Marley Cornog, sorry. Thank you guys so much. If you would like to join them, get access to early videos and behind the scenes stuff, and just to me, and join our Discord group, you can go to patreon.com/answerswithjoe. T-shirts available at the store, answerswithjoe.com/shirts. This one's a little bit more astronomical, looking up at the stars. There's all kinds of cool, fun, nerdy stuff there. They're a lot of fun, so go check them out. Please like and share this video if you liked it, and if this is your first time here, I invite you to check out this video. Google thinks you'll like that, and if you like that one, there's all kinds of other videos, and you can go take a look, and if you like those, you might want to think about subscribing, because I do come back with videos just like this on science and future topics every Monday. All right, that's it for now. Thank you guys so much for watching. Go out now, have an eye-opening week, and I'll see you next Monday. Love you guys. Take care.